Welcome to the Create Today podcast. I'm your host, Karen Stanley, certified Rapid Transformational Therapist and hypnotherapist. And my passion is helping women heal from the past and learn how to create the life they love one day at a time. And this show is all about how you can do just that in any area of your life that matters to you. Health, finances, business, or relationships. I believe that everyone's story matters because every story can help someone else. Thanks so much for being here. I'm your host, Karen Stanley, and my beautiful guest today is Terrina Troy. She is an author. She just released her first memoir, and it's called All But Six. And I'm so excited to see you in person and finally meet you. We have a mutual friend, Gina.
Yes, we do.
We'll have to take a picture and send it to her.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm
Thanks
so
for
glad
having
you're
me.
here.
Thank you. It's a beautiful place.
Thank you. So why the title? Why the title All But Six?
When I started writing the book, I really wanted it to encompass everything about my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought about it for a really long time. I had picked a couple other different titles, but
did.
the more I thought about it at the end, I was like, you know what? I don't want this to be about me. I want it to be about him. And this is part of a saying that he used to say all the time.
Oh, really? What does it mean?
It's kind of an old saying that came from a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know if I should say the whole thing.
Sure.
Okay, so it comes from, he used to tell me all the time, stop worrying what everyone thinks. Like, just do whatever you want. And then he would follow it up with, remember, fuck them all but six. Save those for pallbearers.
That's hilarious.
So it's kind of an old saying. Like, I think the military used to say it a lot. So, like, his father was in the military.
Wow.
And so all the time, I heard it my whole life.
That's hilarious.
And so in the end, I was like, okay, this has got to be, like, this pretty much sums up his whole life. He never cared what anyone thought. And he just lived his life the way he wanted to live it.
That's such great advice. And my father is in the military. My husband was military. I've never heard that in my life.
And it also, they used to say it a lot in Ireland. So I don't know if it's because his whole family was Irish, but that's, the whole family knew it. The funny thing was I haven't talked to a lot of my cousins from his side of the family in years, many of them, just because the whole family was sort of estranged in many different ways. But when this came out, the first people that I started hearing from were old cousins I hadn't heard from in forever, and they said we knew the second we saw the cover what it meant.
That's awesome.
Because they heard the saying their whole lives as well.
Wow.
It's really kind of funny.
I love that. So yeah, maybe it's Irish and not so much military.
Yeah, maybe.
I love
know.
it.
Yeah.
When did you first have this idea to write this book?
Yeah. So my whole life, my dad was such a huge character. Anyone who met him was like, wow, like, nobody had a dad like mine. He was just a little bit crazy. And I joked forever, especially in college and stuff. I'm like, someday I'm going to write a book about him, but I never thought I would.
Really?
And then after my dad passed away, and that's not really giving anything away because in the beginning of the book, it's pretty clear that that's what's going to happen. But when he passed away, the way it happened, to be honest, I sort of suffered from PTSD for about a year.
Oh, no.
And it was pretty traumatizing. And it bothered me so much. And so in the past, I'd always written for therapy just to kind of make myself feel better. And I just thought, like, okay, I don't know if I want to write this book, but I feel like I need to write this book. But I knew if I started, I was not going to stop. So I really thought about it a lot because I was like, okay, I'm so OCD that if I start, it's definitely going to, become a book. But after about a year of just like reliving everything that happened, I was like, okay, I have to write this book. I was so angry at how it ended. I was so overwhelmed with this emotion of his life needed to matter. And so that was kind of the driving force behind it. And then once I started writing it, I was like, oh, this actually made my PTSD go away.
Really?
So, yeah.
That's amazing. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older brother and I have a younger brother.
So just three. Oh, you're the only girl.
I'm the only girl.
And the middle child.
And the middle child, yes. And my older brother, in the story, I don't want to give too much away, but we all have the same mom. Let's put it to you that way.
Okay.
So I'm really my father's only child.
Oh, got it. Okay. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
You only have the same mom and not the same dad. Oh, your dad's only child. Oh, that's so special.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that's like. I have 10 brothers and sisters.
I can't even. It's so funny because in the end of the book, I mentioned saying like, one of my girlfriends like, I'm so sorry that, I wasn't there. I couldn't be there. I was like, maybe in another life I'll have a dozen siblings, but not in this one.
Maybe. Be careful what you wish for.
Right? I know.
No, I love it. And anybody who's young or getting married or thinking about children, I go, I have a ton of them. I just have a ton of kids.
Yeah.
Because I grew up thinking that it was like so weird and awkward and like we didn't have any money and we were fine.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I'm thinking that
Sure.
there's all of these cons and less pros to having a huge, huge, huge family like that. Chaos, all the things.
Lots of chaos.
And as the older I get, the more years that go by, I'm like, man, that was the most incredible experience to have an army of people. We still have an army, literally. All of the sisters. I have 7 sisters.
Wow.
3 brothers. 52 nieces and nephews.
What?
Literally.
That's crazy.
My youngest sister is not even done. She just only had her first child. So
Wow.
we've got 5 great-grandchildren already. My nieces and nephews are starting to have kids. And it's so wonderful. Even with all the chaos and all the things, it's just like, man, just to have that support and as many people in your corner and just we don't have that anymore. Most people don't have very many kids.
Absolutely.
So anyway, have a ton of children.
That's a huge family.
It is huge. It's nuts. That'll be my next book, which is really funny because I'm number 6. And so the title of my next book is going to be my favorite number 6.
Oh, wow.
That's what my mom always says.
That's
You're my
awesome.
favorite number 6. I'm like, thanks, Mom. And as a side note, that has nothing to do with anything. My husband's an only child and with horrible parents. And one day, I think 2 years ago, she called him number 12 and he cried.
Wow.
Isn't that sweet?
It's so sweet.
He just feels like part of a big family now. He's like, whoa, I always wanted to be in a big family. Like,
it must be overwhelming.
It is. Oh, 100%.
To go from like 0 to 60.
Yeah. 0 to 100.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Crazy.
Anyway, enough about me. Were you born and raised in Tucson? No, you weren't born there.
No, I was born and raised in Michigan.
Michigan. Wow. Did you go to college there?
I started at college there, and then I left and ended up finishing in California.
Oh, how did you end up in Tucson?
So years and years and years later, after living in California and then going back to Michigan, I ended up meeting the man that I'm married to now. John is his name.
Great name.
And he and I decided we wanted a fresh start, so we ended up moving to Scottsdale. So we lived there for about 18 years.
Wow.
And then during COVID, we went to Albuquerque, and we were living near some of his kids at the time. But we discovered that they just don't have really great health care there. And so my husband has a lot of health issues, and so we ended up having to leave. And he wanted to come back to Arizona, and so I wanted to try something different. So it's like 18 years in Scottsdale. I'm like, and it's super crowded now. And
It really is.
yeah, so we ended up in Oro Valley, which is just north of Tucson.
It's so beautiful.
And yeah, it's super beautiful. It's really quiet. It kind of reminds us of Scottsdale like 20 years ago.
It's exactly what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
Really, when and the whole East Valley, really. I mean, there's so millions and millions of people have moved here in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's kind of lost its charm. That's why I'm way out here in Southeast Gilbert, because it's very similar to Oro Valley, and it's new, and it's away from stuff, but stuff is closest.
Yeah, I like it here too.
Yeah. Did you have horses in Michigan?
No, in fact, I had a fear of horses.
Really?
Yeah, growing up, I had a fear of horses. I talk about it in the book. And my grandparents had a farm, and they had these giant, Belgium horses, and they had bulls, and they had all kinds of stuff. And I was always getting hurt, and I was always being the wild child. And so my grandfather would say, like, don't walk behind that horse. He's going to kick you, or he'll kick you to the moon, or he'll bite you, or he's really mean, or, so I was kind of afraid of horses growing up. And I wanted to get over that. I hate letting fear run your life. And it was,
Same.
so it's like, I just sort of tackle things that I'm fearful of on purpose. And so I was like, you know what, I got to get over this horse thing. And so I ended up leasing a horse. My neighbor had a horse and she kept bugging me, can you come meet my horse? And I'm just like, I'm terrified of horses. No,
Wow.
and then finally I was like, okay, I got to suck this up. I got to get over it. So I ended up leasing a horse, taking lessons.
I didn't even know you could lease a horse.
Yeah. This
wild.
I know. And this trainer ended up giving me riding lessons, and I'd never, sat on a horse. Like I had no interest, but I love animals. Absolutely love animals.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking like 8 lessons, and by the end of the 8th lesson, I was loping around the arena. And so I just loved the horse. But sadly, as I tell in the book, the horse ended up dying. So I know. But 2 months later, a friend of mine ended up calling me and saying, I don't know if you want a horse or not, but my good friend is getting rid of his horse. He can't ride anymore. And I was like, what? I'm like, I can't own a horse. Like, I don't know anything about horses, So I ended up calling my dad. And in the book, I talk about my dad saying, like, give me a break. You can own a horse, you can do this. And he totally encouraged me. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have a horse. So at 50 years old, I got my first horse.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's our dream, to have a ranch and horses and chickens and the whole thing.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah. Someday.
Yep.
I keep looking at land, and I printed out some to put on our vision board, So not tomorrow, but someday.
I know. I just love it. I even put on my website, I would hoard animals if I had a ranch.
Well, then you need a ranch.
Right?
No, that's what my daughter says. I'm going to have 16 dogs when I move out. And
right.
then I'm going to have 40 cats because you won't let me have a cat. I'm like,
right.
Great. You can have as many cats as you want when you move out.
Yep.
It's awesome.
Your house.
Were your grandparents the ones that you were just talking about? Is that your dad's parents?
It was my father's mother and stepfather.
Stepfather. Are they immigrants, or are they born in this country?
They were born in this country.
They were. Mm-hmm. So it was probably how many generations back were actually in Ireland? Do you know?
2.
So their parents. Mm-hmm. Oh, so they're only second generation, and your dad was only third.
Right.
Oh, that's so cool. What other kind of Irish things did they do that's kind of sticks out? I don't have any. Well, I have a little bit of Irish, but not much in my family.
Yeah, one of the main things was that, the worst thing you could possibly do in an Irish family is be lazy. You could commit a crime, but do not be lazy.
I love that.
Yeah, and so everybody in my family kind of grew up with this enormous work ethic, and God forbid you were that kid who just didn't have it because you were going to be estranged. And yeah, it was not going to be good.
Did you get whacked with a belt?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean,
we did when we were kids.
Pretty much. I mean, my dad would never, but yeah, I mean, my father came from a family of 5, and all of his other siblings kind of hated his grandparents. And they lived on a farm, like a 180-acre farm. And
wow.
Lots of work to do. And when my dad was a twin, he and his twin brother were little, like 5 years old, they'd be on the, farm dragging the hay around and working and doing whatever grandpa wanted them to do. And the other siblings were like, well, I want to go play baseball and football, and I don't want to do any of this. And so they ended up not really liking him too much. But my dad kind of grew up with this, I don't know, this ideal that you must work. And so, and he had this old soul too, where he was sort of born with these innate abilities. Like 10 years old, he was fixing his mother's car. Wow. It's like, who does that, But he did. And when he was 15, his mother wanted to move north in Michigan at the top of the mitten, take all the kids. And
my gosh.
She had been promoted and given a job where she was like head of Social Security. And so they were all moving up north. And my dad said, no, I'm not going.
When he was 15?
15, yeah. So he stayed behind and got a job and rented a room somewhere and didn't go.
That's nuts. But on a farm, you grow up real fast. And
yeah.
You're driving, like you said, he's probably driving a tractor when he's 10 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure.
Yeah. And he didn't live on the farm, but they visited quite frequently. And so whenever he was there, he was expected to work, for sure.
That's amazing. We need more of that.
Yeah.
Is your dad's twin, are they identical?
They were not.
No. Are they alike?
They were alike in many ways.
Yeah.
Yes, they both were alcoholics. They both were truck drivers. They both smoked their entire lives. They both said that saying all day long, every day. And yeah, it was. I think it's interesting now to talk to his twin brother's children, who I've reconnected with.
Oh,
and his oldest or his son actually. He and I really hit it off. And the one thing that we've learned from the experience of kind of growing up with these crazy personalities, these personalities, is that you just earn a sense of humor, you know. And so he just had me laughing so hard when he read the book. He was like, "Oh my gosh!" And he said, "If I wrote a book, I would have called it Smoking with the Windows Up." It's like, because his dad constantly, I mean, just that's what they did back then.
Oh,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
And they never run down the windows,
No.
but they're also in Michigan. It's freezing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either.
Part of the year, yeah, for sure.
Oh, it's so cold up there.
Right.
Why did you lose touch with your cousins?
Well, you know, I don't know if this makes any sense at all, but in our family, if the parents aren't talking, then the kids don't get spoken to. So it's like for a while there, you know, I didn't have a relationship with my dad at one point. So there was about like 10 years where we didn't speak. Wow. And during that time, I didn't have any contact with his family. And it's because you know, if he's not talking to me, then they're probably not talking to me. So that's kind of how that broke down.
And when you reconnected, did they confirm that they really didn't want to talk to you? I'm curious if that's actually true. I mean, that's what you thought, but is that true?
Yeah, pretty much. It was, you know, well, I heard you said this and he said that and you said that. And so it was, you know, it's a whole narrative that gets built that, you know, you're a terrible person and all this kind of stuff.
So you're the terrible person.
Yeah.
Clearly.
It's horrible dysfunction and just really zero communication skills whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the sad part of the story is that, you know, there is so much dysfunction and people, I have this saying like, own your own shit, you know, and it's like so many people can't own it. They have to figure out a way to make it your fault.
I know.
You know, and that's kind of what happened with my dad. Like I was a mirror almost to all of the things that he couldn't accomplish. I was a mirror for. I would not accept the lifestyle that had I just stayed on the track that everyone else did before me, you know, I would have been, you know, pregnant and, you know, a high school dropout and living in a trailer. And I just refused to do that. You know, I was like, I'm going to make something of my life. But with each time I would accomplish something, I would have this boundary, you know, of, see, I can do it. And no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it was kind of like a mirror where, wait a minute, I don't like that you're doing this and I'm not, you know? And so by watching me finish college and like, you know, get it together and do all the things that I did on my own, I think that it made a lot of people feel like, oh, well, look at her, you know, instead of, wow, good job. That means I could do it too, you know? And so I've experienced a lot of that in my life, which is kind of frustrating, but at the same time, I know where it's coming from and it's not mine to own. It's their garbage.
Yeah, it makes them feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you when you realized your dad was an alcoholic?
I think I always knew he was an alcoholic.
Even from very, very young age?
I think so. I think initially I was definitely a daddy's girl and we were really close. And, you know, whenever I was sick or whatever, he was rocking me and he was very loving in that way. I'm grateful for that. I never had a very strong connection with my mother. So he was always my go-to for comfort. But there were lots of fights and, you know, arguments and physical things that happened. You know, not my father. My father never touched my mother, but I saw my mother rip his shirt off and, you know, lots of physical.
She tried.
Yeah, lots of physical fighting, that kind of thing. But, yeah, I think I
saw that a lot.
Yeah, sure. And I remember being 4 years old and telling my brother Tony, they should just get a divorce. They'd be happier.
Wow.
You know, it's like I just knew. And I think at one point it got out of control, where it was like, at first it was like he drank, and I understood that he probably had a problem, but I was too young to really put a lot of thought into it. But then as my life progressed, and my parents decided to get a divorce, then it was really getting ugly, and it really became quite obvious. And then in my 20s, I didn't have any contact with him, because prior to that, I'd had 15 to 20-ish, I'd had a lot of interaction with him, being binge drinking, and just, he went out for cigarettes and came home 2 weeks later.
Wow.
When I was 15.
And so they were still married at the time?
No, my parents divorced when I was younger.
Oh, how old?
I think I was, by the time it was actually done, I think I was about 7.
Wow.
So yeah.
Did you go back and forth in their houses, or would you?
I did for a little while. Yeah. Initially, when they were starting to split up, my dad was sleeping in my bed and I was sleeping with my mom. So it was one of those things where they weren't quite ready to be apart. And then later he moved out and she remarried, and pretty quickly that same month the divorce was final, she got remarried.
Wow.
And then it was just a lot of chaos after that. My mother moved us all the time. They hated each other so much that it was just constant confrontation. And so at some point, my father went to go welding on the Alaskan pipeline, and he was just gone. And so then I didn't see him for many years. And sometimes he would show up to pick me up, even when we were kind of seeing him, and sometimes he wouldn't show up.
Yeah, you never knew.
Never knew. Yeah. So it was pretty chaotic.
During that time when you were watching them, like you said, hate each other so much, did you get mad at them? Just get over it? What's going on? Did you take one of the sides sometimes, or what was that like?
I think somebody said a long time ago, when you fight in front of your children, it changes who they are. And that's kind of what happened to me. I sort of just started getting hardened to the hatred, hardened to what they even wanted, because I just figured out I was never going to be able to give them what they wanted. And so I didn't necessarily feel I was leaning toward one side or the other, but I did have a soft spot for my dad, because I was obviously, close with him.
Yeah.
But I hated when they both said terrible things about each other to me. But it was out there in the open. It wasn't like, oh, I overheard them say something bad about them. They
yelling at each other right in front of you.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever, once you got older, did you say, you guys knock it off? Did you ever jump in or tell them to stop?
No, I guess I kind of knew better when I was older. Luckily they stopped seeing each other once I was about 15.
Oh, good.
So there weren't really any more bump-ins to each other, except for, and I tell the story in the book, where my younger brother is hospitalized.
What happened?
He was in a car accident.
Oh.
And it was pretty bad. I was living in California at the time, and so I rushed home, and he was head injured. So my father showed up at the hospital, and there's this huge scene in the book where I actually don't talk to my mother after age 15 either.
Wow.
But we bump into each other at the hospital, and my mother goes at it with us, and it turns into this huge scene. And yeah.
Where did you go when you were 15 if you're not seeing either parent?
Well, I moved in with my dad when I was 15, but only for a year. And then I ended up moving in with my grandmother, my mother's mom.
Wow.
So I lived with her for until I graduated from high school, until I was 17, and then I went to college.
In California?
No, actually, I went to a school in Michigan called Ferris State University.
Oh, that's right. You did say
So,
Michigan.
yeah, just for about a year and a half. And then I ended up having another blowout with my dad and a big, huge issue, and ended up saying, well, I'm a dropout, so I guess I'm going to just go to California. My girlfriend had moved there and was going to college there, and she was getting married. So I was like, well, I have to buy a ticket for the wedding. Why don't I just move there?
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
Great idea.
That's what I did. I bought a one-way ticket when I was 19 and I moved.
That's nuts. What part of California?
It's in the East Bay. It was called
Bay Area.
Yeah, the Bay Area.
Yeah. Wow. So when I want to hear more stories. And I don't think it ruins a book at all. I just think I love to hear, the reasons why you wrote the book. And I think then we'll all enjoy this so much. I know I'm going to love this book. It's going to be so fun. But it's also heartbreaking at the same time. So you really have to laugh. Yeah. And congratulations for overcoming all of that and seeing the beauty of his life and the good things. Why do you think that he drank so much? Did you ever figure that out?
That's a really good question. I think that my dad was brought up in a time when drinking was just part of what you did. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it. Mm-hmm. I think that everybody he knew drank. He was blue-collar worker. Mm-hmm. He was around drinking his whole life. His father was an alcoholic. He died at a very young age. I think he was 55 with cirrhosis of the liver. I think that he also sort of inherited that issue, the drinking issue. And, people say it's genetic or whatever. I don't know if it is or not, but he had a drinking issue. His twin brother had a drinking issue and his father had a drinking issue. And so...
no one else in his family?
I think there are some others that have issues, but they were the two that were less functional, my father and his twin. And I think that that's part of the issue. And I also think that because of his upbringing, I think that he had some things that maybe he was just not able to really cope well with.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what they were? Did he ever talk about it?
He never did.
Yeah.
Nope, he never did.
That's the other thing about the culture. You just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing about in the recent years, at least I think more people are opening up and they're able to just talk. Mm-hmm. When I don't think any men talked 50 years ago.
Yeah, I agree.
I could be wrong, but I, just see that as a cultural thing,
For sure.
And not to be generalize an entire group of people, but it is typically a problem. And there's a lot of alcoholics in Ireland. I remember when I went to Ireland, I absolutely love Ireland. Oh my gosh. I would go back tomorrow in a second. Mm-hmm. It's so much fun. It's one of the few European countries that love Americans. And we had so much fun. We would just close down every bar. I was with the choir. So we were singing everybody was singing. It was so fun. And when you would come down for breakfast in the morning, there's literally 20 people at the bar. I'm getting some eggs and toast and they're on their third pint at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, wow, did you leave or did you just get here? Yeah. Is this before you go to work?
Yeah.
And it was mind-blowing. And by the way, kids, if you haven't been to Ireland, you cannot drink as many Guinnesses in Ireland as you can in America.
Definitely not.
It's like 40% alcohol or something. I had no idea. I have never been so sick. I had 4 beers.
Yeah.
That's how strong it is. Yeah. I was so sick.
It's not for the faint.
No, and I'm a seasoned professional. 4 beers is nothing. And I'm big. It's like, that's nothing for me. I was on the floor. Hilarious. I had no idea. Anyway, there's a little Irish tip for you.
Right.
Anybody who hasn't been there. Have you been to Ireland?
I have not. No.
Oh, come on.
I know.
Seriously?
It's on my bucket list.
Oh my gosh, you have to go.
I know. I'm dying. I want to go.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So, but Irish, it's just not atypical. I mean, it occurs so often.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm naive and maybe that's not even true, but just my experiences and what I've read and heard.
Definitely common.
Yeah. I also read, have you read any Frank McCourt books?
I have not.
Oh, you also need to read those. Angela's Ashes is his first one.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up in the slums in Ireland. And
Right.
then he came to America, and it was not any better for the first little while.
Right.
It was worse. And it was such a good book. It's one of my favorite books, Angela's Ashes.
I've heard of that book.
You got to read it. I think they made a movie of it, but I don't like watching movies after I've already read the books. It's always terrible.
Yeah.
It's such a disappointment.
Yeah, Hollywood gets their hands on it.
It's dumb.
Yeah.
You can't put it all in there. And besides, my imagination is better than theirs, I guess.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. They miss everything. There's chunks that are not in the movie because otherwise it would be a 6-hour movie.
Right.
So I get it, but I didn't watch the movie. It was awesome. So back to your dad. Not really sure why he drank so much. How old was he when he passed?
70.
Yeah, so young. Mm-hmm. So sad.
He actually lived a lot longer than I thought he would live.
Really?
Yeah, because he had such a crazy life. I thought for sure that he would die young. And I mean, 70 is young, but I just thought he would be like gone a long, long time ago.
Yeah, his dad only lived to 50.
Yeah. 55.
What about his twin?
65.
Gosh, dang it.
Yeah.
Was it alcohol related? Was it liver or whatever related?
I'm not really sure. I know when he passed away, my dad said, well, he just drank and smoked himself to death. He should have taken it easy. And he was really, upset about it. He said, just like my dad, if he just would have laid off the hard liquor, he would have been fine. He said, I told my dad, you can drink, just lay off the hard liquor. And he said, that's what killed him.
The hard liquor.
The hard liquor killed him.
But beer's fine?
Yeah, beer's fine. And smoking. I mean, they
Cigarettes
all
is fine.
Smoked. I mean, my dad smoked since he was, I don't even know, 12 years old probably.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And was still smoking at 70.
Yeah.
So,
but his twin brother should have stopped.
Yeah, exactly. just couldn't moderate.
And then your dad, did he switch to beer, or is he still drinking hard liquor?
Well, he
taking his own advice.
He was primarily a beer drinker, Busch beer. And the reason why he drank Busch is because supposedly it's the highest alcohol content. So he gave us that little lecture in college when he showed up to visit, and I gave him a Molson.
That's hilarious.
Like, yeah, I see you girls haven't learned yet that Busch beer has the most alcohol.
It actually does have more than Molson? I don't even think that's true.
I don't know.
Now we got to look it up.
Right? I know. That's
I'm curious.
That's what he used to drink, and that's what he used to say. But that was his favorite beer. But in the end, he was drinking hard liquor.
Yeah.
And I think that he had lung cancer. So I think he was trying to kill himself, to be honest.
Yeah.
So.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Did he remarry?
Never did.
He stayed single.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about some of the stories that are the reason that you call him so wild. What are your favorite memories? Let's talk about the best memories with your dad.
Let's see. I think when we were kids, he just let us be kind of wild and crazy. He always had heavy equipment and stuff at the house. And sometimes my mom would not really watch us very well. And sometimes my grandma would come, like her mother, my called her Gram. She would come and babysit us. But we were always doing wild stuff, shooting snakes with guns and, BB guns.
Real guns? Oh, good.
BB guns, yeah. And I had a giant butcher knife cutting it up, and because there was a lump, I wanted to know what it was,
Wow.
And just like we would run wild, and we would hop into the equipment. And one time we hopped into his road grader and we ran it into my Gram's car. And I put that in the book too. But he would come home and he was never mad at us. He just never upset him. And one time when the road grader incident happened, my grandmother was quite upset that her new car we had just driven into. He said, well, Margaret, I guess you should do a better job of watching my kids.
How did that go with Margaret?
Well, she was a sucker. He was very charming.
Oh.
And so, he got away with murder too.
Really?
Yeah. So those are, when I was a kid, those were some of the funny things that happened, just over and over instances like that. But when I was in college, I took him to college one day. He came to visit at Ferris, and I think he kind of wanted to know what college was like, because he'd never gone. And so I would have been 18. He was been 38 years old and never set foot in college. So he came to visit, and I took him to a class, and I describe in the book where he comes. And, it was I was on pins and needles the whole time. But
oh, you were nervous.
Yeah.
Like, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he sat behind me, and in the middle of the lecture, he started smoking a cigarette. And I'm just like, what is going on? And I turn around and I'm like, Dad, it's like not smoking in here. You can't do that.
He's like, what?
He's like, screw me. I'll clean it up.
Oh,
Screw
you
him.
don't have to.
He said, they can kick me out of here. And I'm like, oh, well, that's all I need right now is for my professor to be kicking my father out of class, you know? And I'm like, Dad, please stop. So he ended up like, you know, putting it out. And, yeah. He had a cup of coffee and threw it in his coffee, but
Professor never said anything, never stopped the class.
No, I'm sure he was scared to death of my dad, you know. But
really?
When we left, I said to my dad, okay, we're done. 55 minutes is all the higher education that you need.
Yeah.
And so I ended up like skipping the rest of the day and just taking him to, you know, the bars and stuff.
Right.
And that is another story in the book. It's another funny story. There's a kid that was kind of picking on my best friend at college. And he came into the bar that night, which was unfortunate for him. So
yeah.
So my dad, I won't blow the story because it's in the book, but my dad sort of took care of him and gave him a little tutorial on how to treat women. A
little lesson.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
He deserved it.
Right.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
Of course, my roommates and my other friends were just mortified. Like, not mortified, I guess that's not the right word. I was probably mortified. They thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Because here's this adult like taking on this kid. Probably most parents wouldn't have done that. So
yeah, probably not.
No,
but I would say, but we need to. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
No, you shouldn't go around assaulting people. But
yeah,
some
yeah, and
it's appropriate.
I was just glad he didn't end up in a cop car that night because
he didn't press charges.
He could.
Kid,
no, he didn't. He didn't beat him up that badly, but he set him straight.
Oh my gosh. Did your dad get in a lot of fights?
It's kind of funny. My dad was very scrappy. So he was like 6 foot tall, but his whole life he weighed about 165 pounds. As he got older, he lost weight and was even thinner. But he never, he wrenched on trucks his whole life. And so he had like these Popeye arms, like he had huge hands. He just was a scrappy guy and he didn't take any crap. And he had kind of this set of rules that he lived by that was, you don't screw with an underdog, or like if he was at a bar and he really befriended the barmaid, which was very typical, and someone came in and mistreated her. That was it. The pool stick was going to be cracked over that guy's head. He was going to leave with a shiner. There was no doubt that it was going down.
Wow.
So several times, even when my dad was older, I remember seeing him when he was maybe 55, and I'd be like, Dad, why do you have a black eye? He's like, well, you should see the other guy. I'm like, I don't want to see the other guy. What?
Seriously, Dad?
Like, what are you doing?
Even in your 50s, he's beating people up.
Oh, yeah.
But always in defense of somebody else.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yeah.
He wanted to protect people.
Yeah.
And he was serving justice.
Exactly. And he taught me to be loyal in that way as well. And so I have to say, when I was going in school and whatnot, I probably shouldn't have done some of the things I did and said some of the things I said. But you know what? If you're two-faced and you do something to one of my friends, like, you're going down. That's the way it was.
Good.
But that's just, you learned
that from him.
Learned from him.
Yeah, you watched him do that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's cool.
Yeah. So this is kind of some funny stuff. But even just little things, like when I was older, I had asked him to watch my dog. And I was going out of town. We were estranged for 10 years, but then when we kind of got back together, we decided that we would be friends. We would try to develop a friendship. And when I gave him that second chance, he did everything he possibly could to hold on to that.
Aww.
Yeah, even to the point where he apologized for, he told me at one point, I really think you deserved a better father.
Aww.
And I'm really sorry for some of the things that I did and wasn't there for you. And, you had to do everything on your own. And like, he really came clean in a way that most parents who, do that with their children don't. I think it's rare, really.
Probably. I don't know.
I don't think anybody on my mother's side will ever say sorry. So for him to do that.
What was that like for you?
For me, I said to him, you know what, Dad? And this is in the book too. I said, you know what? I I don't care about that anymore. You know, I don't want you carrying that around.
Yeah.
Because I have gotten to the point where I'm grateful for everything that happened to me. I wouldn't change anything. And a lot of it was brutal. A lot of it was harsh lessons.
Right.
But I wouldn't change a thing because it's made me who I am today. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I think that's one of the things that parents make mistakes with their kids today on is everyone wants their kids to have some cushy kind of life where, oh, let me put a little pillow under your butt and, you know, you never hit the ground. No. And I get it because you love someone and you want them to have the best, but at the same time, you don't earn grit. You don't earn self-esteem. You don't earn real self-worth you can't buy that for somebody. You can't give it to them. You can't tell them, oh, Karen, I think you're so great. And you're going to walk around thinking you're so great. You have to earn it to really, really have it. Yep. You know, and especially when times are tough and when things get hard, you know, how do you have that grit? You know, if you don't struggle. And so for me, I was like, you know, I wouldn't change anything because I feel like I earned who I am and I like who I am and I fought for who I am and I don't need anyone else to tell me anything.
That's beautiful.
And I think that's something that if more parents would think about, I think kids wouldn't struggle as much as they do in this crazy world that we have with self-esteem because you're always comparing yourself on social media now. And you do have different stressors than maybe perhaps I
100%.
did when I was growing up. But at the same time, it's still the same lesson. Right. You know, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. You know, it matters what you think. Yeah. Don't impress someone else, impress yourself. Yeah. You know, those are the kinds of things that I learned because my dad was the way he was. And I told him that if you had been different, I would have been different. And he just released that day, which was amazing, you know, and I felt good about giving him that, you know, to just let go of it, stop carrying it around.
Was he emotional?
Yeah, he cried.
He did.
He cried.
Wow.
Yeah. And the funny thing is in the book, I talk about how he hated when I cried. He wouldn't allow me to cry. Like it really, really upset him to see me cry because he couldn't fix it, you know, like it hurt him, I think, too much. Right. And so constantly, you know, don't cry. Please stop crying, and you know, that kind of thing. But when several times, like when we first reunited and I saw him after not seeing him for 10 years, he cried like a baby. Aww. I'd never seen him sob before. Wow. And I didn't cry because at that point I had already cried for 10 years, you know, so I was like,
seriously,
I can't cry anymore.
Who made the first move?
It was me, actually. I was being kind of nosy. My grandmother had given me his address and I didn't want it. And she was like, no, you know, just pull over, Dolly, and write it down. I'm like, oh, great. Whatever, just to make her shut up. I pulled over and I wrote it down. And then I threw it in my glove box and I just kind of ignored it. And then one day I was coming back on a business trip and I looked at the map back when we didn't have GPS. I pulled out my map, like, where the hell am I? And I'm like, oh, wow, there's Dad's address. And I'm actually like just 15 minutes away. Weird. Like, maybe I'll drive by, just be nosy, just to look, because he had this shop. She kept telling me, he's got this semi-truck repair shop. You know, you should, you know, he's doing really well there and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whatever. And I didn't care because, you know, at that point I wasn't talking to him and whatever. So I got really nosy and I drove over there and it was not in the greatest of areas. And I pulled up in front of the shop and I got out and I tried to look in the windows and the windows were really high, you know, on the garage door. And I'm like, dang, I can't see and whatever. So I started to walk back to my vehicle and I noticed someone out of the corner of my eye and I was like, oh, great, I'm going to have to kick someone's ass today. So I like turned around. I'm like getting ready for someone to jump me. Wow. You know, and I turned around and it was him. And I didn't expect him to be there because it was like 7 p.m. and I thought for sure he'd be at the bar or whatever. But there he was. Yeah. So he came around the corner and he saw me and kind of like his eyes blinked. And I just stood there just to see what he would say. And then he took his T-shirt and was like wiping his eyes, almost like, this can't be what I'm seeing. Like, I think he was literally in shock. And I just was like, hi, Dad. Like, I didn't, you know what to say. And it was strange to see him after all those years. He looked the same, but he definitely looked older, you know, and he just ran right up to me, hugged me, and he was like, oh my gosh, honey babe, is this really you? And he just started sobbing. I'm like, it's me, Dad. It's really me. And I just, at that moment, was totally aware of everything that was happening, but I just couldn't cry. I'd cried for 10 years. I was like, I can't.
I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, no, I just couldn't do it. And then I wasn't angry anymore because I'd really worked through it all, but I just didn't know how I felt about, I didn't think I'd run into him. I really didn't. I was just being nosy.
Wow.
And so then I was like, oh, great. Now what am I going to do? And so we decided to exchange numbers. We chit-chatted for a little while, and we decided that maybe we could be friends. Wow. And so from that point on, a lot of funny things happened. You know, like I had just bought my first house, and he told me, I said, Dad, you know, I got to hook up this gas dryer. And should I just call it like a handyman? Can they do that? Like, what should I do? He said, oh, honey, don't do that. They'll fuck you like a house cat. He said, just do it yourself. I'm like, what?
Well, no, why don't you do it?
I'm like, okay. So I went down the hardware store, followed his instructions, you know.
Seriously?
Yeah, hooked up my own gas dryer.
Wow.
And then I called him and I was like, my whole house smells like gas. I think there's something wrong.
Oh, shit.
And he was like, just open the doors. You'll be fine. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I left on my business trip.
Oh, no.
And he came back the next week. And he said, I'll look at it. So he walked in there, and all of a sudden I hear him laughing, and he's in the laundry room laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? He said, hey, honey, did you use a tool when you tightened this at the wall? I was like, no, I just used my hand. They didn't tell me that I needed a tool. He's like, well, you could have blown up this house.
Oh, my gosh.
I was like, okay, thanks, Dad, for letting me do that.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Why didn't he just do it to begin with?
Yeah, he was busy, so he couldn't come up and help me.
Oh, my gosh.
And then another time I had him watch my dog, and I don't know what I was thinking, because today I would never let that happen. But I was desperate. I was going out of town for business, and I was like, I was telling my dad about it. And like, oh, gosh, you know, I should have made a reservation, but I didn't know the trip was coming up. And he goes, well, just bring Braddy. My dog's name was Braddy. Just bring Braddy down with me. He was a Wheaton Terrier. You know, they're white. And I'll watch him. And I go, oh, no. And I started backing out. Oh, no, Dad, that's okay. He's like, no. Bring him down. You got to go right by me to get to the airport anyway, which was true. Oh. So I was like, okay, all right. So I brought him down, and I had all, you know, like in the book, I describe everything. I was like over the top, you know, he was my baby, with the little luggage with all of his toys and baby gates, the whole deal.
Oh my gosh.
Written out instructions and, you know, what he could eat when. And
he didn't follow any of it.
No. I pick him up, and I'm like, where is he? He's like, oh, he's in the back running around. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He's running around your shop? Oh, yeah, I let him do whatever he wanted. I was like, what is happening right now?
No.
And
Was
the
he
dog
okay?
comes run out. He's 100% black, head to toe, covered in oil. My dad just let him run underneath the semis. And then he got out. And I'm like, what do you mean he got out? I told you don't let him out. You know, what are you thinking?
He's like, what?
He's like, well, luckily he caught a rabbit. I'm like, caught a rabbit? What do you mean he caught a rabbit? We caught the rabbit, and, you know, and I was able to catch him. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to kill you right now. And then I was like, well, how did you do on the food? Did he eat? He's like, oh, I just dumped the whole bag out into a bin, and he ate whatever he wanted for the whole week. I'm like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. He was just
He sounds like my people without the drinking.
Right.
That's how my mom was. We'd leave for vacation. We just put the biggest mixing bowl of dog food that we had on the back porch.
Right.
Dog was fine.
Right. He's like, he said, well, it's not like he can tell me if he's hungry, he wants to go to the refrigerator.
Leave it out.
So I go, yeah, I'm really glad I typed all those instructions out there for you, Dad. I mean, he just didn't care.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, he's hilarious.
Oh, my gosh.
Time and time again.
Yeah.
The very first car he ever gave me in high school had a hole in the gas tank. He said, don't put any more than $5 in it, honey.
Because the hole was a little bit higher, just higher than $5 worth.
Yeah. So that's the car I drove. And every once in a while I would park on a hill and it would spill out.
Oh,
and then
no.
the whole car would reek like, you know, gas.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my dad would get in and smoke, and he's
Empty.
like, take me. And I'm like, Dad, you're going to catch the place on fire. Oh, it's fine. I'll keep the ashes inside. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
seriously.
You know, there's something I believe really magical about that. Really literally going through life. It's really just nothing matters that much.
Yeah.
Because think about all the anxiety and the fear that we have. We're struck with at all times, and or it just comes at us, and we just all the things that we worry about in general, just in general, like life. You know, our kids, our safety, whatever, the future, all that. And it's like, man, I love those people that just don't worry.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. Whatever is fine.
Yeah.
And my mom's like that. And I just interviewed her a couple weeks, or last week or whatever it was. She was just here. And she just finds joy in the dumbest things. I mean, not dumb, just in the simplest things, in everything. Everything, she looks at it as wonderment. And she doesn't worry about stuff. She's just like that. Yeah. We would have gotten along great.
Yeah, my dad just lived moment to moment. You know, he just, like one time he asked me for a ride home. He was living out in the country at the time, and I had just gotten off work, and he like let my car run out of gas. I kept saying, Dad, I need to stop and get gas. And he's like, no, we'll be fine. Like, we ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, what are we going to do now? He's like, I'll fix it. You know, and he hitchhiked to the gas station, got some gas. I mean, just nothing ever worried him. He just figured it out moment to moment.
I just think that is truly a gift, not the drinking part. And it's so sad that that debilitated him. That it's sad. I think it's a symptom of whatever it is going on inside that brilliant mind of his. Obviously, he is brilliant. Yeah, is
right.
And I love that you wrote this whole memoir about it, to not just to honor his memory, but to just share. Like, and I think it's inspiring. It's all of the things. Like, we can learn from that, and we can learn to not worry about things. And we can learn that we really can just figure anything out. Yeah. No matter what it is, especially now. He didn't have YouTube videos back then.
Right, exactly.
And if you had YouTube, you would have watched the YouTube video and you would have known you needed a tool.
Exactly.
Glad you didn't blow your house down.
Right.
And it's amazing that nobody's house did get blown up and your cars didn't get blown up this whole time.
Right, exactly.
That's what amazes me about my childhood. How did we even survive? There's seat belts. We didn't have any cars that worked. I mean, they had like 6 cars, and one of them was in the shop at all times.
All the time, yeah. Exactly.
There's just a circulation. It's like drop off one, pick up the one that's ready.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that's incredible. I can't wait to read it now that I was always going to read it, but I've got like 10,000 books that I have ordered in the last month. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited for my listeners to read this and to hear all of the stories. I feel like there's a lot of lessons in there. That has to be one of the reasons why you wrote it.
Definitely. Yeah. There's so many lessons. I feel like because of him, things were easier for me in a lot of ways from a just life lesson perspective. And I see a lot of people struggle with some of the things that I think like, oh gosh, that just seemed like it came natural to me. But it was because of him. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that he really taught me was making sure that you respect someone else's wishes. And, you live your life, I get to live my life. And we can do that in a non-judgmental way.
Totally.
I might not agree with everything that you do, but I respect that that's how you want to do it. And that's something that I think is really lacking today.
Yeah.
When my dad was passing away, he, at one point he was in the hospital and he said, well, I'm not going to my deathbed without telling you that I still smoked, because at one point he had his lung removed.
Oh.
And he still smoked.
Oh my gosh.
And and I said, I knew that, Dad. And he goes, well, how did you know? I said, because I could hear you talking, when I was talking to you on the phone, I could hear you smoking. And plus I knew if you had quit, you would have told me I quit for X number of days, but he never said that. And I always heard him smoke on the phone. So he said, well, how come you never said anything? I said, it's your business. You can do whatever you want.
You taught me that.
Yeah. And he said, well, you're special. Not everyone thinks that way. And I'm like, well, if I'm special, it's because of you, because that's what he taught me was, you live your life, I live my life, and everyone should live their lives the way they want to. Yeah. And as long as you're not, hurting somebody, then,
exactly.
Then it's fine.
Right.
So yeah, it was a big lesson. There were so many great lessons that I learned from him. And he was just a, high school dropout, blue collar worker that people kind of see those people in a different way. They sort of see them as not smart, and so many of them are brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
I agree.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I wanted to write the book too, is that I feel like parents today struggle with a little bit of self-esteem because there's so much pressure on kids. Like they look up to everyone who's rich or famous or, and parents kind of feel like, well, gosh, I'm not rich and famous. I'm not going to have as much influence over my child as they will. But I really think that parents do.
Yeah. I think we have the wrong criteria for whom we look up to. A lot of people do. Mm-hmm. Like, if one more person talks about Taylor Swift, I'm going to fucking punch him in the face.
I know.
I don't give a shit. She's bought and paid for, and everything she does is scripted.
100% propaganda.
Why is everybody talking about her? Why does anybody care? Like, they are literally worshiping her.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting.
It is gross.
So we're just completely out of whack in that way. I totally agree. Mm-hmm. The people that are working so hard and they can fix any car and do, like, their mind works, like they can literally fix anything. My uncle's like that. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what it is. Mm-hmm. If it has been put together, he can disassemble it, fix a problem, reassemble it. Yeah. Doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. And it doesn't matter how old it is and how new it is. He's a genius.
Yep.
And yeah. And so I totally agree.
Those are the people that are, brilliant. I mean, those are the ones that you think, like, the question, who would you pick to go on a desert island with, or deserted island, or whatever that question is?
That one.
Yeah. I mean, it would be my dad. Mm-hmm. Be like, okay, just as long as he has his cigarettes and his beer, he will figure the rest out.
Might run out after a while.
Like, we don't need tools. We don't need an engineer mind. We don't need, the PhD from Harvard. Just my dad and beer, and you're fine. We will get off the island. Like, he's just brilliant, There and there are so many like him.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's too much emphasis on these lunatics that are just, it's all propaganda.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just all fake. Mm-hmm. That's so great. I mean, I could sit here for another 3 hours listening to stories, and it's, time to wrap up, but I'm so grateful that we met and we were introduced, and that you came today and made the drive over here and told us all about your dad and keeping those memories alive and your family. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime. And listeners, anyone, if you're viewing this on YouTube, thank you so much for being here and supporting my show and just listening today and watching. And make sure that you go get All But Six by Terrina Troy. You can get it on Amazon. And where else can we find you?
BarnesandNoble.com.
Oh, it's on Barnes & Noble. That's right. It's not on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon,
It's
too.
both. Okay. Mm-hmm. I got it on Barnes & Noble because that's the link that you sent me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's both. And then your website?
TerinaTroy.com.
Awesome. And then you're also on Instagram, too.
I am. Instagram and Facebook.
It's just Terrina Troy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Exactly.
And I'll put all that in the show notes as well. But
okay, great.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. And listeners, God bless you. And just remember that you can create the life that you love one day at a time. God bless. Thank you for being here and listening to my show. If you got any value at all, it would mean the world if you shared it and left a review. Remember, the only way to create the life you love is to take it one day at a time. Create today. God bless you.